Okay, so having listened back to the audio, what are my thoughts? Well, I'll start by saying that my general experience of these two guitars was that I kind of thought that the Jaguar was a bit darker sounding than the Jazzmaster and a bit fuller, had a bit more low end. Whereas I thought of the Jazzmaster as being kind of brighter and thinner sounding. And I think as generalizations, those do hold up. However, I think what we've seen in this video is that it's actually a lot more nuanced than that. If we start with the neck pickup, I think it's true that the Jaguar has a darker, fuller, bigger sounding neck pickup, and the Jazzmaster has a thinner, brighter neck pickup. However, even with the bass cut engaged on the Jaguar neck pickup, although it got closer to the Jazzmaster, the tone was still fundamentally different. The Jazzmaster's response is rounder and softer and sweeter and clearer than the Jaguar, even when they have a similar amount of bass in the sound. Whereas the Jaguar is a lot more direct, it's a lot more punchy than the Jazzmaster. So the differences aren't just in the amount of bass they have, there's a fundamental difference there in the tone that the pickups have. When we listen to the clips of the middle position, I think they're probably the most similar sounds between the two guitars. They're both very bright, they're both very sweet, but again with the Jazzmaster we can hear that it's clearer, that it's still sweeter and rounder, and it has a kind of hollow sound to the tone that the Jaguar doesn't have. The Jaguar is still very much more kind of punchy and more direct. The Jaguar has a more focused and muscular sound compared to the Jazzmaster. When we compare the two bridge pickups, I think this is where the generalization starts to fall apart a little bit and doesn't work so well. The mid emphasis on the Jaguar pickup is definitely in the upper mids, those kind of sizzly presence frequencies. Whereas on the Jazzmaster they're further down in the frequency range, so they're more towards the lower mids. In the clean comparisons, the Jazzmaster has a more hollow sound again, it's kind of more scooped. And I think it's also more dull, it's more flat sounding, and there's definitely less high end in the sound. Whereas due to that mid emphasis on the Jaguar, the clean sound on the bridge is more snappy, it's more twangy, and it actually sounds brighter than the Jazzmaster here. I also don't think there's a very big difference in the low end response of the two pickups on the clean sound. With Overdrive the story is different. The characteristics of the pickup stays the same, but how this comes out in the sound becomes very different. Although the Jaguar technically has more low end, because of that emphasis on the upper mids, it sounds very cutting, very biting. And the emphasis on those higher frequencies actually makes it sound thinner, I think, than the Jazzmaster. With the emphasis lower in the mids on the Jazzmaster, it sounds more raucous, it has more of a growl to the sound than the Jaguar, which I think makes it sound kind of bigger and fatter with the distortion, even though there's technically less low end in the sound than there is with the Jaguar. To characterise the two, the Jaguar chimes more, whereas the Jazzmaster I think growls a bit more. On the fuzz examples, I think you can definitely hear the increased low end in the Jaguar sound. It creates a really fat, full fuzz tone. The Jazzmaster definitely isn't as fat, it still has that hollow sound to it, but what you get with that is a lot more definition and clarity. The emphasis in the lower mids is definitely still there, and I think that really comes out in the single note parts rather than in the chord work. You can see why Jazzmasters are so popular with people who use a lot of fuzz in their sound. The thing that surprised me the most actually is how different the rhythm circuits sound on the two guitars. And I just always assumed that the rhythm circuit is the rhythm circuit, that it just sounded kind of dark and the same on both guitars. But actually the difference is really stark. On the Jaguar it is kind of what I expected. It's quite dark, it's a little bit dull, it's kind of thick and syrupy. Whereas on the Jazzmaster, the tone is still really articulate, it's still surprisingly bright, and it's really clear. If anything, I think the Jaguar sounds more jazzy than the Jazzmaster. So in conclusion, it's not quite so straightforward as to say that the Jazzmaster is brighter and thinner, and that the Jaguar is kind of thicker and a bit darker sounding. It really all comes down to context. Overall, I really like the twangy, snappy bitiness of the Jaguar Bridge pickup, and the kind of sweet, soft, round clarity of the Jazzmaster Neck pickup. I think they both sound really nice and bright and jangly in the middle position, and overall I really like the enhanced clarity you get on the Jazzmaster rhythm circuit compared to the Jaguar. That being said, I don't think there were any bad sounds, those are just my preferences between the two. Let me know your thoughts on which tones you preferred in the comment section. The last thing to say about these tone comparisons is that clips 7, 8 and 9 were a little bit harsh, I think. When I was recording them I thought they sounded really good, but listening back to the audio I think there's a bit too much high-end content there. I generally like quite a bright, cutting guitar tone. In my cab here I have two WGS Invader 50 speakers, and they sound very similar to 20-watt greenbacks. Whereas the IR I used had 25-watt greenbacks, which have more high-end content in them. And that might possibly have been the reason why there was a bit too much high-end in those sounds. So apologies for those slightly grating clips. Okay, so why bother making this video at all? Well, a couple of months ago I had the opportunity to get a new guitar. I just got a new job and my wife agreed that to celebrate I could spend a little bit of money on something new. I had my eye on a couple of different things, including the Squier Classic 5 Jaguar and the 40th anniversary Jazzmaster. I'd always really wanted a Jaguar since I saw a clip of a guy called Luke Cyrus playing a vintage Jaguar on MySpace back in about 2008, and some videos by Phil X from around the same time. But I'd played a few and was never really sure that I actually liked them in real life. However, over the last couple of years I've really gone down a rabbit hole of kind of looking into offset guitars, and have gained a lot of knowledge and kind of understanding from people like Mike Adams' YouTube channel, Lord Fuzzman, Ryan from 60 Cycle Hum, and others. I knew both guitars were quite good at doing clean, bright, chimey, kind of surfy sounds, and that people liked using them with a lot of fuzz. But beyond that, I wasn't really sure which would be more appropriate for me. I'd already had experiences with two offset guitars. The first was a Revelation RGT60 Deluxe, which is their kind of Jazzmaster body. It's smaller and thicker than a normal Jazzmaster body. And the Deluxe means that it has an offset tremolo like this, and it also has thin, wide Alnico pole pickups, kind of like Jazzmaster pickups. I really liked that guitar, but I had a lot of problems with the bridge. It had a roller tune-o-matic style bridge on it. And I had a lot of frustrations with trying to get that to work properly, and in the end I sold that guitar. I never quite bonded with it despite using it a lot. My second was this. It is a 2018 Squier Bullet Mustang, and again I had a lot of problems with this, trying to get strings that worked for using it live with a really heavy right hand. I could never quite get it to sound the way I wanted to, and I had a lot of problems just with the feel and getting it to play and feel the way I wanted it to. In the end, the biggest change that made me happy with it was changing the bridge out for a bridge made out of steel and brass, and adding a brass string through block on the back. However, with these two experiences, with a short scale offset and a Jazzmaster style offset that I hadn't really ever been totally happy with, I wasn't quite sure if either guitar were right for me. So to try and see a direct comparison of the two, I went to YouTube and searched for Jaguar and Jazzmaster comparisons. I was surprised how few videos I found, and the ones that I did find, I didn't find very helpful. People didn't really play in the style that I would play in, they didn't play in the sounds that I would kind of use, and I wasn't left any the wiser at the end of it. Eventually I went to a couple of different guitar shops and played kind of 20 to 30 guitars. I took my head and my pedal board, and eventually after all of that I bought this guitar, the Classic 5 Silver Sparkle Jaguar. About a month later I was struggling a lot with another one of my guitars. I was never really happy with it, and I managed to part exchange it with someone online for the 40th anniversary Jazzmaster. So I made this video for anyone else wondering about the differences between the Jaguar and the Jazzmaster. Not necessarily the feel and the scale length and stuff like that and the wiring, but how they sound. Okay, so why did I only use the Strangle switch on the neck pickup of the Jaguar? Well, my intention here was to compare the sounds of the Jaguar and the Jazzmaster. I thought it was a useful comparison, seeing if the kind of really thick sound of the Jaguar pickup on the neck could become more like the Jazzmaster with the Strangle switch, and we discussed that earlier on. I didn't find the comparison so useful with the bridge and middle positions, so I didn't include those, but they are still good sounds in their own right. Another question is, why didn't I play a fuzz sound with the rhythm circuit? That's a great question. It was just an oversight on my part, and that's something to look into in a video in the future. So I've saved this to the end rather than telling you at the beginning. What equipment did I use in this video? So I used the Squier Classic Vibe 60s Jaguar and the Squier Classic Vibe 40th anniversary Jazzmaster. Both have the stock Alnico 5 pickups that Squier sell with them. And although they're perhaps not the most vintage accurate pickups, they're still going to give you a good idea of what these two guitars characteristically sound like. I am going to be changing the pickups on both of them to vintage spec Alnico 2 pickups from Northern Pickups, and videos on both of those will be coming soon. Both guitars have been set up properly. They've got a 1 degree pitch back on the neck, They have been covered in Loctite to stop them rattling, and I've also shimmed the nut on the Jaguar too. Both guitars have Elixir 10 to 52 strings on there, the OptiWeb variety, and they're both a pretty similar age. They also both have 1 meg pots as standard. The amp I used was my Bluguitar Amp 1 Mercury edition. I used a clean channel, which is a kind of tweed bassman kind of sound, and I used the vintage channel, which is a vintage Marshall Plexi sound. I had the gain on about 6 for both of those, and the master cranked all the way up to 7. That was running into my 2 Notes Cab M, and as I mentioned earlier, I was using a 25 watt greenback 4x12 cab, and that was mic'd with an Electro Voice RE20 mic, which is an extended range dynamic mic. For pedals, I had BBE Sonic Stomp on all the time. I have that in the effects loop. That compresses the low end, and then you can control how much of that you have in your sound. I had that on about 10 o'clock. And I had the process knob, the treble knob, at about 1 o'clock. So it's pretty subtle. It's just adding a bit of punch and tightness in the low end and a little bit of extra sparkle on the top because my amp doesn't have a presence control. For the fuzz sounds, I used DeadEndFx Grima Fuzz, which is the overdrive and fuzz circuit from the Schumann PLL fuzz modulation crazy effects pedal. And that has an overdrive circuit in it and a fuzz circuit, and you can blend them together. So I had the overdrive maxed out, and then I had it blended about 50-50. So you get a really big Velcro glitchy fuzz sound, but you still get a lot of note definition and clarity in it. And all of that was running into my Behringer UMC204HD interface, and then into Ardour 6 on AV Linux. So I hope this has been useful, helpful, informative, and that it might help some of you out there who were in my position before. Feel free to share any of your thoughts below in the comment section, and please tell me anything I forgot to include or anything I did wrong. If you're interested in more videos on offset guitars, on pickups, on fuzz pedals and on amps, consider subscribing, and particularly to see the updates that happen to both of these guitars. Alright, until next time, see you later.